This happened 3 years ago when I was 24. I was out in the high desert of Arizona doing contract work for the State Geological Survey, basically driving around to remote locations, taking soil samples and updating old mineral surveys from the 1970s. It was good money for a recent geology grad, and I actually enjoyed the solitude. That particular week in late March, I was working a section about 2 hours northeast of Flagstaff, near some old ranch lands that had been sold to the state decades earlier. The weather was typical for spring in the high desert, blazing hot during the day, down to near freezing at night. I'd set up my base camp near an old windmill and stock tank, one of the few reliable water sources in that stretch of nothing. The plan was simple. Spend 5 days hitting all the survey points on my GPS, camp at night, then drive back to Flagstaff Friday afternoon to drop off samples and resupply. I had my truck, my equipment, enough food and water for a week, and a satellite phone for emergencies. Cell service was non-existent out there, but that was part of the appeal. Just me, the rocks, and the endless sky. The first 2 days went exactly as planned. I'd wake up at sunrise, eat instant oatmeal, then drive out to my survey points. Most were within a few miles of camp, though some required hiking into narrow canyons or up onto the mesas. The landscape was stunning in that stark desert way. Red rock formations, scattered juniper and pinon, the occasional golden eagle circling overhead. I'd gotten into a good rhythm. The first odd thing happened Tuesday evening. I was back at camp cooking dinner on my propane stove when I heard someone call my name, clear as day, from somewhere out in the gathering darkness.
Michael!
Just like that, in my mum's voice. Now, my mum lived in Ohio, and definitely wasn't wandering around the Arizona desert. I figured it was just the wind playing tricks. Desert acoustics are weird, and I'd been alone for a few days, but it was specific enough that I actually checked my satellite phone to make sure I hadn't missed an emergency call. Nothing. Wednesday brought more strangeness. I was taking samples near the base of a mesa, about a mile from camp, when I found fresh footprints in a wash. Bare footprints, human-sized but wrong. The toes were too long, and the gait pattern suggested something moving on all fours as much as walking upright. They followed my tire tracks from that morning for about 50 yards before veering off into the rocks. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone out here walking barefoot. Maybe the wind had distorted older prints. But who walks barefoot in a desert full of cactus and sharp rocks? I finished my work quickly and headed back to camp before sunset. That night, things escalated. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of my truck door opening. I kept the keys in my tent with me, and I knew I'd locked it. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent flap just in time to see the driver's door swing closed. Nobody was visible inside or around the vehicle. When I checked, the door was locked again, just as I'd left it. But my notebook, where I recorded all my survey data, had been moved from the dashboard to the driver's seat, open to that day's entries. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in my tent with my flashlight and the satellite phone, wondering if I should call this in. But what would I say? Someone played with my truck but didn't take anything. As dawn broke, I decided to pack up and leave a day early. I could make up some excuse about equipment problems. I was loading my gear when I heard it again.
Michael!
This time in my dad's voice, coming from up on the mesa. Then, horrifyingly, I heard my own voice respond from the same direction. "Yeah, I'm coming." A conversation between invisible versions of my parents and me, echoing off the canyon walls. That's when I noticed the smell, like wet dog mixed with something rotten, strong enough to make me gag even in the open air. I threw the last of my equipment in the truck and started the engine. As I put it in gear, something slammed into the passenger side, hard enough to rock the vehicle. In the side mirror, I caught a glimpse of what hit me. It looked like a coyote at first, but it was standing upright, using its front legs like arms, its face. The proportions were all wrong, like someone had stretched animal features over a human skull. It opened its mouth and my mother's voice came out.
Michael, where are you going?
I floored it, kicking up a cloud of dust as I tore away from camp. In the rearview mirror, I saw it drop to all fours and give chase, keeping pace with my truck for almost a quarter mile before veering off into the desert. I didn't stop driving until I hit the paved highway, and even then I kept checking the mirrors. I turned in my equipment and samples in Flagstaff, but quit the job that same day. Told them I had a family emergency. I've never told anyone the real reason. I work in an office now, doing data analysis for a mining company. Sometimes I'll get assignments that would require field work, and I always find someone else to go. The weird part. About a year later, I was going through my old field notebook from that trip. On the last page, after my entries, someone had drawn a rough map of the area where I'd been camping. There was an X marked about 2 miles from where I'd set up, with words written in shaky English, "Not for you here." I still have that notebook. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed that last night. Then I remember that thing wearing a coyote skin and speaking with my mother's voice, and I'm grateful I'm a coward. The Substitute. You know how every high school has that one teacher everyone whispers about? Ours was Ms. Yazzie, and I need to tell someone about her before I convince myself it didn't happen. She showed up my junior year at Window Rock High School, replacing our regular history teacher who'd had a heart attack. First thing everyone noticed was how she moved, too fluid, like water pretending to walk. She was young, maybe late 20s, with this long black hair she wore in a traditional bun. Dressed normal enough, but something about her face never looked quite right. Like someone had described a beautiful woman to an artist who'd never seen one. The local kids went quiet when she introduced herself. Later, my friend Tommy told me Yazzie was his grandmother's clan name, and his gran had been dead for 5 years. But administration had her credentials. Said she came highly recommended from a school in Shiprock. She knew her stuff too. Could lecture for hours about pre-Columbian history without notes, speaking in this measured, hypnotic voice that made you lean in, even when you weren't interested. But then weird things started happening. First incident was during a lesson on local petroglyphs. She was showing slides of spiral symbols when Marcus, this kid who never paid attention to anything, suddenly stood up and started drawing the same spiral on the whiteboard. His eyes were completely blank. He drew for maybe 30 seconds before snapping out of it, confused why everyone was staring. Ms. Yazzie just smiled and said, "Thank you for demonstrating, Marcus." 2 weeks later, it happened again, this time with 3 students simultaneously. They all stood up during her lecture on migration patterns and began walking in a circle around the classroom, chanting something in an old language that none of them actually spoke. When they woke up, they had no memory of it. The other teachers started noticing, but Principal Begay seemed weirdly protective of Ms. Yazzie, said kids were just acting out for attention. The thing that made me realize she wasn't normal happened in late October. I'd stayed after school for basketball practice and realized I'd left my phone in her classroom. The hallways were empty, that eerie, quiet schools get after hours. Her door was cracked open, and I could hear her talking to someone. I peered through the gap and nearly screamed. Ms. Yazzie was standing in front of the whiteboard, but her shadow was wrong. It had 4 legs and a tail, and she wasn't talking to anyone. She was practicing being human.
Good morning, class.
She'd say, then adjust her face slightly,
Good morning, class.
each time with tiny modifications to her expression, her posture, the tilt of her head, like someone rehearsing for a play about humans. Then she must have sensed me because her head snapped toward the door, 180 degrees without her body moving. I ran, grabbed my stuff from the gym, and got my mum to pick me up, claiming I felt sick. The next day in class, she kept watching me. Not obviously, but I could feel it. And when she handed back our essays, mine had a note, "See me after class." I didn't go. Started skipping her class entirely, taking the absences. My friend Sarah thought I was being paranoid until the day Ms. Yazzie brought in a guest speaker. Except the guest speaker looked exactly like our old history teacher, the one who'd had the heart attack. Same clothes he used to wear, same coffee-stained tie, same everything. Except his movements were wrong in that same fluid way. And when he smiled, Sarah said she saw too many teeth. Way too many. The class ended with half the students in some kind of trance, drawing spirals in their notebooks. Sarah and I walked out. We weren't the only ones. About 6 of us just quietly gathered our things and left. Tommy was one of them. He looked at me and said, "My grandmother warned me about skinwalkers who try to gather people. They're not hunting, they're collecting." That night Tommy's family did something. I don't know what, but it involved smoke and singing that went on until dawn. The next morning, Ms. Yazzie wasn't at school. Principal Begay announced she'd had a family emergency and wouldn't be returning. They brought in a different substitute, normal and boring and human. But here's what still messes with me. About a month later, I saw her at the mall in Gallup. She was working at a clothing store. Same fluid movements, same not quite right face. She saw me see her and smiled. Then she said, in perfect imitation of my voice, "Hey Mum, can we go?" My mum, who was beside me, didn't even notice, but I dragged her out of there so fast. I graduated and left for college in Albuquerque, far enough away to feel safe. But sometimes I search online for new teachers at reservation schools, looking for her picture under different names. Tommy says she's still out there, still collecting, still practicing being human in empty classrooms. He also says the students she put in trances sometimes dream the same dreams, about running on 4 legs through the desert, about wearing faces that don't belong to them, about a spiral that goes down and down and down, with something ancient and hungry waiting at the bottom. I never remembered my dreams before her class. Now I remember them all, and sometimes they're not mine. The night shift. I'd been living in the double wide for 3 months when things started getting weird. The property was a work perk, free housing in exchange for being the overnight security guard at the solar farm just outside Holbrook, Arizona. 20 acres of panels in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but sagebrush and red dirt for miles. The nearest neighbor was a rancher family about 2 miles east, and town was a 40-minute drive. Perfect for someone who'd just gotten out of a bad marriage and needed space to think. My routine was simple. Wake up around 7 p.m., make dinner, feed Diesel, my 3-year-old German Shepherd, then head to the solar farm by 10 p.m. for my 12-hour shift. The job itself was mind-numbing. Drive the perimeter every 2 hours, check the equipment sheds, make sure no one was stealing copper wire. Mostly, I sat in the guard shack, reading or watching Netflix on my phone. Diesel came with me most nights, good company, and an extra set of eyes. The trailer sat on a flat piece of land with decent views of the San Francisco peaks in the distance. Previous guard had left it pretty clean, even built a nice covered porch where I'd sit mornings with my coffee, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink. There was a chicken wire fence around the immediate property, maybe an acre total, just enough to mark the boundary and keep Diesel from wandering too far when I let him out. First sign something was off came on a Tuesday in early November. I'd just gotten home from my shift, about 10:30 a.m., sun already warming up the desert. Diesel was acting strange, wouldn't get out of the truck, just sat there whining and staring at the trailer. I figured maybe a coyote had been sniffing around. I checked the property, didn't see anything unusual. Finally had to physically lift all 80 pounds of him out of the truck. He stayed glued to my leg as we went inside. That night, around 2 a.m. at the solar farm, I got a call on the guard shack phone. Nobody ever called that phone. Most people didn't even know the number. I picked up, heard static, then my ex-wife's voice clear as day.
Baby, I'm sorry. Come home.
The line went dead. Here's the thing. Lisa had been dead for 2 years. Car accident in Phoenix. That's what ended our marriage. Me not handling her death well, drinking too much, losing my job. Except apparently my grief-broken brain had gotten some wires crossed because there was her voice on a phone that maybe 5 people knew the number to. I told myself it was a prank, someone who sounded like her. But Diesel had heard it too. Hackles raised, growling at the phone even after I'd hung up. 2 nights later, things escalated. I was doing my 4 a.m. perimeter check when my headlights caught movement by the equipment shed. A woman in a white dress, long black hair, standing perfectly still beside the building. My heart hammered. Lisa had been buried in a white dress. But when I stopped the truck and hit the spotlight, nothing. Just my own reflection in the shed's window. Diesel went absolutely ballistic, barking and snarling at something I couldn't see. I've never seen him act that aggressive. I finished the check fast and spent the rest of my shift locked in the shack with all the lights on. When I got home that morning, I found footprints in the dirt around my trailer. Bare feet, walking the entire perimeter of the fence line. The stride was wrong, too long, like someone taking deliberately huge steps. In one spot, it looked like whoever it was had stood at my bedroom window for a while. The curtains, I always kept closed, had been pulled back about 6 inches. That's when I remembered something the rancher's wife had told me when I'd introduced myself months earlier. The old woman, she'd looked at me real serious and said, "Don't whistle at night. Don't answer voices that sound familiar. If your dog won't go somewhere, you don't go either." I'd smiled and nodded, figured it was just local superstition. Now I was starting to think she'd been trying to warn me. I called in sick that night, first time since starting the job. Spent the evening securing the trailer, new locks, motion lights, even some cheap security cameras from Walmart. Diesel wouldn't leave my side, kept positioning himself between me and the windows. Around midnight, the motion lights started going off, one by one, like something was circling the property, just outside their range. Then came the knock at the door. 3 measured raps. When I looked through the peephole, Lisa stood on my porch. Not something that looked like Lisa. It was her. Same crooked smile. Same way of tucking her hair behind her ear. She was even wearing the Soundgarden t-shirt she'd stolen from me years ago.
Baby, let me in. I'm so cold.
Diesel went from growling to screaming. A sound I didn't know dogs could make. That's when I noticed her feet. They were wrong, bent at an impossible angle, more like a dog's hind legs forced into a standing position. And her eyes, they reflected the porch light like an animal's. I grabbed Diesel's collar and backed away from the door. "You're not Lisa." The thing wearing her face tilted its head, smiled wider. Then it spoke in my voice. "You're not Lisa." Perfect mimicry, even down to my panicked tone. It laughed, a sound like coyotes yipping, and I heard it walking around the trailer, still on two legs but with that wrong animal gait. I spent that night in my truck with Diesel, parked at a well-lit gas station in town. Called my boss the next morning, quit on the spot. Didn't even go back for my stuff, just drove straight to my sister's place in Colorado. She mailed me my things a few weeks later. Said when she'd gone to get them, the old woman from down the road was there, burning sage around the property. Told my sister that something had been walking with the wrong skin, and it was good I'd left. Said folks around here had been dealing with it for generations, keeping it contained to the empty places. But sometimes it fixated on newcomers, especially ones carrying grief. I work construction now, strictly day shift. Live in a second-floor apartment in the middle of Denver, as far from empty desert as I can get. Diesel's still with me, still sleeps pressed against my legs every night. Sometimes he'll suddenly stare at the window and growl, and I'll remember that thing's perfect mimicry of Lisa's voice. I don't talk about it much, but when people ask why I left Arizona so suddenly, why I won't take jobs in rural areas, I just tell them I'm a city person now. It's easier than explaining that something out there in the desert learned to wear my dead wife's face, and the only reason I'm alive is because my dog knew the difference. The hunt. This happened last October when I was 26. I'd drawn an elk tag for Unit 7 east of Flagstaff, and my brother-in-law Rick had offered to come along even though he didn't hunt. He knew the area from his Forest Service days and figured I could use a spotter. Plus, Marissa worried less when I wasn't out there alone. We set up camp Thursday afternoon in a spot Rick knew, about 8 miles down a forest road near Mormon Lake. Perfect elk country, mix of ponderosa pine and open meadows, fresh sign everywhere. The plan was simple: scout Thursday evening and Friday, hunt Saturday through Monday, pack out Tuesday morning. Rick had brought his good binoculars and would help glass the meadows while I tried to call bulls in. The weather was ideal for elk. Crisp mornings in the low 30s, warming to maybe 60 by afternoon. That first evening, we hiked to a ridge overlooking a series of parks and immediately spotted a herd of cows with a decent 5x5 bull. They were about a mile off, feeding their way toward the dark timber. I was pumped. Rick marked the spot on his GPS, and we planned to be there before dawn. Friday morning came, with a light frost and dead calm conditions. We were in position by 5:30, watching the meadow emerge from darkness. No elk. We spent the day exploring other areas, finding rubs and wallows, learning the terrain. Rick showed me some pictographs on a cliff face, spirals and animal figures that he said were pretty common in the area. That evening, we saw the herd again. Different meadow, but same general area. The bull was bugling, and I practiced my calls, getting a few half-hearted responses. Everything felt right. Good sign, good weather, elk talking. Rick made his famous camp chili while I organized my gear for the morning hunt. We turned in early, exhausted but optimistic. I woke up at 2 a.m. to absolute silence. Not normal forest quiet, complete absence of sound. No wind, no small animals rustling, nothing. Then I realized what had woken me. Something was breathing outside the tent. Deep, rhythmic breathing. But the rhythm was wrong. Too long between inhales, like something was smelling rather than just breathing. I elbowed Rick awake, put my finger to my lips. We lay there listening as whatever it was circled the tent slowly. Once, twice. On the third pass, it brushed against the rainfly, and I got a whiff of something rank, like wet dog mixed with spoiled meat. Then footsteps walking away, but wrong. The pattern was off, like someone taking 2 steps with their left foot for everyone with their right. Neither of us slept the rest of the night. At first light, we found tracks around the tent. They started as boot prints, transitioned to bare human feet, then to something else entirely. The final prints near the fire pit looked like coyote tracks, but were the size of my spread hand. Rick stared at those prints for a long time, finally said, "We should go." But I'd driven 6 hours and waited 5 years for this tag. I convinced him to give it one more day, promised we'd hunt close to camp. Looking back, I should have listened. Saturday morning, we set up on a small ridge, maybe a half-mile from camp. Good vantage point, escape routes in every direction. The woods were still too quiet, but I figured whatever had visited our camp had moved on. I started calling just after dawn, soft cow calls to start, building to challenge bugles. 20 minutes in, I got an answer, but it was wrong. It started as a perfect elk bugle, then morphed into something else, like someone learning the sound in real time. Each call getting more accurate, but also more human. Rick grabbed my arm, shaking his head. The calling was getting closer, fast. Too fast for an elk picking its way through the timber. I stopped calling, but it didn't matter. Whatever was coming had locked onto us. It emerged from the trees 60 yards below us. From a distance, in the low morning light, it looked like a bull elk. Trophy bull. Massive 6x6 rack. But it was standing upright on its hind legs, walking like a man. Its front legs hung at its sides like arms, and its face, the proportions were all wrong. Eyes too far forward, mouth too wide. Rick and I froze. The thing stopped, tilted its head and called again. This time it was my exact call, note for note. Then it spoke, in Rick's voice. "That's a nice bull. Take the shot." I couldn't move. The rifle felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The thing took a step closer, still on 2 legs, and its antlers shifted. They weren't antlers. They were branches, twisted and woven into something that looked like antlers from a distance. "Take the shot," it said again, this time in my voice. Rick broke first, grabbed my pack and shoved me. "Run, now!" We ran, crashed through the timber like spooked deer, branches tearing at our clothes. Behind us, that thing bugled, a sound that started as elk and ended as human laughter. When I glanced back, it was following on all 4s, moving through the trees like smoke. We hit the camp at a dead sprint. Rick had his keys out, throwing gear in the truck bed. I dove into the passenger seat as he fired up the engine. In the mirrors, I saw it standing at the edge of camp, upright again. As we tore down the forest road, it raised one of those wrong front legs and waved. A perfectly human gesture. We didn't stop until we hit pavement. Didn't talk until we reached Flagstaff. At a gas station, Rick finally spoke. My grandmother was Hopi. She told me stories about things that hunt the hunters, skinwalkers that take the shape of what men desire most, then take the men themselves. I turned in my tag unused, told everyone I got sick, had to leave early. Rick and I never talked about it again, but I know he thinks about it. Last week, Marissa mentioned he won't go camping anymore, makes excuses when his Forest Service buddies invite him out. I still hunt, but only day trips now, only in groups, never in Unit 7. Sometimes, when I'm glassing a meadow and see movement in the timber, my hands start shaking, because I know that somewhere out there, something learned my voice, learned my call, and one day someone else is going to answer it. The Detour. My sister Elena and I were driving back to Phoenix after our grandfather's funeral in Farmington. It was just the two of us in her beat-up Honda, trying to make the 6-hour drive in one shot because neither of us could afford a hotel. This was back in February 2019, middle of the week. Hardly any traffic on the 191 cutting through the reservation. Elena had been living in Phoenix for 3 years, working as a nurse at Banner Health. I was finishing my senior year at ASU, studying mechanical engineering. We weren't particularly close. 10-year age gap will do that. But family is family, and Grandpa had raised us both after our parents died. The funeral had been rough. Lots of relatives we hadn't seen in years. Lots of questions about when we were moving back home. The usual guilt trips about abandoning our culture. We left Farmington around 4 p.m. Figured we'd be home by 10. Elena drove first while I navigated, though it's pretty much a straight shot south. Weather was clear but cold. That high desert winter where the sun feels warm but the air bites. We stopped in Ganado for gas and switched drivers. That's when things started going sideways. About 30 miles south of Ganado, we hit a roadblock. 2 tribal police cars, lights flashing, officer directing traffic off onto a dirt road. He said there'd been a serious accident ahead. Hazmat spill. Highway would be closed for hours. The detour would add maybe 40 minutes, but would get us around it. He seemed legit. Uniform, badge, the works. Even gave us a hand-drawn map showing how the dirt road connected back to the highway near Chambers. The detour started fine. Decent gravel road, recently graded. Eleanor was nervous about her car handling it, but I'd driven worse in my friend's truck. We passed a few other cars heading the same way, which made us feel better. But after about 20 minutes, the road forked. No signs, no indication which way to go. The map showed a fork, with an arrow pointing left, so we went left. That's when we stopped seeing other cars. The road got progressively worse. Gravel turned to dirt. Dirt turned to barely there tracks through the sage. Elena kept asking if we should turn back, but I was stubborn, kept saying we had to be close to reconnecting with the highway. The sun was setting, painting everything in that golden light that makes the desert look like Mars. Beautiful, but also made it harder to see the road. Then we saw the woman. She was standing right in the middle of the track, facing away from us. Long grey hair, traditional velvet skirt and blouse. Eleanor slammed the brakes, honking. The woman didn't move. We sat there for maybe 10 seconds before she finally turned around. Her face was my grandmother's. My grandmother, who'd been dead for 15 years. Elena made this choking sound. I couldn't speak. The woman, the thing wearing my grandmother's face, smiled and beckoned us to follow, then walked off the road into the desert. Not walked, glided, like her feet weren't quite touching the ground. That's not her, Elena whispered. That's not fucking her, Miguel. I knew that, but part of me wanted to follow anyway. That's the thing about seeing someone you loved and lost. Even when you know it's impossible, the heart overrides the brain. Elena threw the car in reverse, but the engine died, just cut out completely. She tried the ignition. Nothing. No click, no turnover. The radio was dead too. Our phones had lost signal miles back, but now they wouldn't even turn on. The not grandmother appeared at Elena's window, tapped on the glass with fingernails that were too long, too sharp. When she spoke, it was Grandma's voice exactly. "Mija, why are you driving around out here? Come, I'll show you the way home." Elena was crying, pressing herself against me. I reached past her and locked the doors, like that would matter. The thing circled the car, running those wrong fingernails along the metal. The sound was horrible, like claws on a chalkboard, but deeper, vibrating through the frame. Then there were more of them. Shapes approaching from the desert, some walking upright, some on all fours. In the dying light, I caught glimpses. A man in an old military uniform, a child in a school dress, a woman in modern clothes, all with that same gliding movement, all with faces that probably meant something to someone. One looked like our dad. Eleanor lost it then, started screaming, pounding on the horn even though it wouldn't work. I grabbed her, held her, tried to think. The shapes were getting closer, surrounding the car. Some were starting to change, features shifting like smoke. The one that looked like Dad dropped to all fours, body elongating in ways that hurt to watch. That's when I remembered something our actual grandmother used to say. If you're lost in the desert and see familiar faces, close your eyes and think of water. They fear the sacred. I fumbled for the water bottle in the cup holder. Just a half-empty Dasani, nothing sacred about it. But I opened it, splashed some on the windshield, and started praying. Not in English or Spanish, but in the broken words our grandparents had taught us, words I hadn't used in years. The things outside recoiled. Not much, but enough. The engine turned over. "Drive," I told Elena. "Don't look at them, just drive." She gunned it, tearing through the circle of shapes. In the side mirror, I saw them give chase. Some running upright, some on all fours, all moving faster than anything should. But we had wheels and desperation. And after the longest 10 minutes of my life, we burst onto an actual paved road. The highway. Somehow, we'd circled back to the 191, about 50 miles from where we'd started. There was no evidence of any accident, any hazmat spill, no roadblock. It was like we'd imagined the whole detour. We drove straight through to Phoenix, stopping only once for gas in Flagstaff. Under the fluorescent lights of the station, Eleanor looked at me and said, "Those weren't cops at the roadblock, were they?" I shook my head. We never talked about it again, but we also never drove through the res separately after that. Last month, Eleanor called me out of the blue, said she'd been having dreams about Grandma beckoning her into the desert. Said sometimes, in the dreams, she follows. I've been having them too. Sometimes I wake up in my apartment in Tempe and find red dirt on my feet, even though I haven't been home in months. Sometimes I hear fingernails on glass when I'm alone in my car. The detour is still out there waiting, and part of me knows that eventually we'll take it again. Only this time, we might not make it back to the highway. The Watcher in the Woods. I'd been living in the rental house for 6 weeks when the problem started. The place was a godsend after my divorce. A 2-bedroom cottage on 5 acres of wooded property about 20 minutes outside Eureka, California. The landlord, Mr. Chen, had practically begged me to take it. Said the last 3 tenants had broken their leases early but wouldn't elaborate. For $800 a month in California? I didn't ask questions. The property was mostly redwoods and ferns, with the house sitting in a clearing about 100 yards from the main road. No neighbours visible through the trees, though I knew there were other houses scattered along the ridge. I worked from home doing medical transcription, so the isolation was perfect. Just me and my 2 cats, Mochi and Biscuit, who spent their days watching birds from the screened-in back porch. My routine was simple. Work from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m, take a walk on the property, make dinner, read or watch Netflix until bed around 10. The cats had full run of the house and seemed to love the space after our cramped apartment in Sacramento. I'd even set up a small home office in the second bedroom with a view of the tree line. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. The house itself was older, probably built in the 70s, but well maintained. The back porch looked out over a gentle slope down to a seasonal creek. The front had a gravel driveway that curved through the trees. No garage, just a carport. The nearest streetlight was a quarter-mile away. At night, it got properly dark. It was a Tuesday in early September when Mochi first acted strange. I was working at my desk when I noticed him sitting at the sliding glass door, ears flat against his head, growling low in his throat. Mochi never growled. He was staring at something in the trees, tail puffed up like a bottle brush. I got up to look, but couldn't see anything unusual. Just the same wall of redwoods and undergrowth. Probably a deer, buddy, I told him. But he didn't relax until I closed the blinds. That night, both cats refused to go into the back bedroom. They'd been sleeping on the bed in there since we moved in, but now they planted themselves on my bed and wouldn't budge. Biscuit kept looking toward the hallway, pupils dilated. Around 2 a.m., I heard what sounded like footsteps on the back deck. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone trying not to make noise. The motion light didn't come on. I lay there, heart hammering, until the sound stopped. The next morning, I checked around the deck. No prints, nothing disturbed. I figured it must have been a raccoon or maybe a bear. They were common in the area. But the cat stayed weird all day, following me from room to room, jumping at every little sound. Thursday night, things escalated. I was getting ready for bed when both cats suddenly ran from the bathroom and hid under my bed. A second later, I heard it. 3 distinct knocks on the bathroom window. The frosted glass made it impossible to see out, but something was definitely there. I grabbed my phone and the baseball bat I kept by the bed, crept to the bathroom door. The knocking came again, same pattern. 3 measured raps. I didn't sleep that night. Kept all the lights on, bat in my lap. Cats pressed against my legs. I called in sick the next morning and drove to Home Depot. Bought motion cameras, new locks, window alarms, the works. Spent the whole day installing everything, checking sight lines, making sure every approach was covered. The cameras connected to my phone, sending alerts for any movement. Friday night, 11:47 p.m. My phone exploded with notifications. Motion detected on cameras 1, 3, and 4, all at the same time. I pulled up the feeds with shaking hand. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Each camera showed a figure standing perfectly still at the edge of its range. They looked human-shaped but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, joints bent at uncomfortable angles. They weren't moving, just standing there, facing the house. Then I realized the truly terrifying part. There weren't 3 figures. It was the same figure, somehow appearing on all 3 cameras simultaneously, despite them covering different sides of the house. As I watched, it took a step forward on all 3 feeds, moving in perfect synchronization. The cats were going insane, yowling and hissing at every window. I called 911, babbling about intruders, but as soon as I mentioned seeing the same person in multiple places, the dispatcher's tone changed. She said she'd send someone when available. I knew that meant they thought I was crazy. The figures on the cameras kept advancing, that same measured pace. When they reached the motion lights, the bulbs flared and died. Pop, pop, pop. Darkness spread across my yard like spilled ink. I grabbed the cats, shoved them in their carriers, and ran for my car. As I fumbled with my keys in the carport, I saw it clearly for the first time. Humanoid but elongated, like someone had stretched a person on a rack. Its face was the worst part. Features that shifted and writhed, never quite settling into anything recognizable. It stood between me and the driveway, head tilted at an unnatural angle. "I've been waiting," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "The others left too soon, but you stayed." I threw the car in reverse, gunned it backward through the garden, tearing through Mr. Chen's carefully maintained flower beds. The thing didn't chase, just watched with that unstable face as I fled down the dark road. I drove straight to my sister's house in Portland, 5 hours north. Didn't stop, except for gas. Didn't look back. The cats huddled silent in their carriers the whole way. When I finally felt safe enough to check my phone, I had dozens of camera notifications. I deleted the app without looking. Mr. Chen wasn't surprised when I called to break the lease. Didn't even ask for an explanation. Just said he'd mail my deposit to my sister's address. The last thing he said was, "I'll have to try renting to someone without pets next time. It seems to prefer the ones who come alone." I found a studio apartment in downtown Portland, 3rd floor. Lots of neighbors, street lights everywhere. The cats have adjusted, though they still won't look out windows at night. Sometimes I catch them staring at nothing, ears back, and I wonder if it followed us. If it's out there in the urban shadows, waiting with that shifting face. I know one thing for certain. I'll never live alone again. And I'll never, ever rent a house on wooded property, no matter how good the price. The Hitchhiker's Game. My girlfriend Ashley and I were driving back from her parents' place in Nevada, taking Highway 50 through the desert, because she wanted to see the loneliest road in America. This was back in March, and we'd been dating about 8 months. Long enough to meet families, but not long enough to know each other's every quirk. The trip to her parents had gone well. Her dad even laughed at my jokes, and we were both in good spirits despite the 6-hour drive ahead. We'd left Ely around 3 p.m., planning to make it to Sacramento by 9. Ashley drove first while I played DJ, scrolling through Spotify for road trip songs. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, mild temperature. The kind of day that makes you grateful for air conditioning and cruise control. We stopped in Austin for gas and switched drivers. That's when I noticed the first car. It was parked at the far edge of the gas station lot. A beat-up white sedan with Nevada plates. Nothing special about it, except the driver never got out. Just sat there, watching. When we pulled back onto the highway, I saw it in my rearview mirror, maintaining the exact same distance behind us. 3 car lengths, never closer, never farther. About an hour later, the sedan was still there. Ashley was dozing in the passenger seat, so I decided not to mention it. Probably just someone else heading to California, I told myself. The highway was empty enough that seeing the same car for miles wasn't that weird. But when I sped up, it sped up. When I slowed down, it slowed down. Always those same 3 car lengths. The sun was getting low when we saw the hitchhiker. A woman, maybe mid-30s, standing on the shoulder with her thumb out. Long brown hair, jeans and a flannel shirt, holding a cardboard sign that said Reno. She looked normal enough, but something felt off. Maybe it was how she stood perfectly still, not trying to flag us down, just watching us approach with this slight smile. "Should we stop?" Ashley asked, suddenly awake. I glanced in the mirror. The white sedan was still there. I don't think... "Come on, she's alone out here. It's getting dark." I had this gut feeling, this immediate no that I couldn't explain. But Ashley was already giving me that look, the one that said she thought I was being paranoid and selfish. We'd had this discussion before. She thought I was too suspicious of people, too quick to assume the worst. "The car behind us has been following us for like 2 hours," I said. "Something feels weird." Ashley turned to look. "That's probably just someone going the same direction we are. You can't leave her out here because you're paranoid about some random car." I slowed down, warring with myself. The hitchhiker grew larger in the windshield, still smiling, still perfectly motionless. At the last second, I made my decision and accelerated past her. Ashley hit my arm. "What the hell, James?" "I'm sorry, but something's wrong. Look." I pointed at the mirror. The white sedan was pulling over right where the hitchhiker stood. "See? She's got a ride." Ashley crossed her arms. "That's probably her friend who was driving ahead to make sure someone picked her up. God, you're such an asshole sometimes." We drove in tense silence for the next 20 minutes. I kept checking the mirror, but the white sedan didn't reappear. Maybe they'd turned off somewhere. Maybe I really was just being paranoid. I was about to apologize when Ashley grabbed my arm. There she is again. The same woman, same clothes, same sign, same pose, standing on the shoulder like we hadn't just passed her 20 minutes ago. This time, Ashley was quiet. I drove past without slowing, and neither of us said anything. But I saw Ashley lock her door. 10 minutes later, she was there again. And again, 5 minutes after that. Always ahead of us, always with that same slight smile. The 4th time, Ashley was crying quietly. The 5th time, I almost drove off the road trying to get past her as quickly as possible. "How is she doing this?" Ashley whispered. That's when the white sedan appeared in my mirror again, matching our speed perfectly. I floored it, pushing our Honda up to 95, then 100. The speedometer climbed, but the sedan stayed exactly 3 car lengths back, like it was attached by an invisible rope. The hitchhiker appeared again, and this time she was pointing at us as we passed. "Call 911, I told Ashley. She fumbled with her phone. "No signal. James, I haven't had a signal for the last hour." Neither had I realized. We were in a dead zone that seemed to stretch forever. The gas gauge was dropping toward quarter tank. We'd have to stop soon. And then what? The hitchhiker appeared again. This time she was holding a different sign. It had Ashley's name on it. Ashley screamed. I nearly lost control of the car. When I looked back, the woman was gone, but the white sedan was closer now. Maybe 2 car lengths. I could see the driver in my mirror. The same woman, same smile, hands at perfect 10 and 2 on the wheel. There, Ashley pointed to an exit sign. "Fallon, 10 miles. We can get help there." Those were the longest 10 miles of my life. The hitchhiker appeared 3 more times, each time with a different sign. "Ashley, James, we're waiting." The white sedan crept closer with each appearance. By the time we saw the lights of Fallon, it was practically touching our bumper. I took the exit at dangerous speed, tires screaming. The sedan followed. I ran the red light at the bottom of the ramp, turned hard into the first gas station I saw. Bright lights, people, safety. I skidded to a stop right in front of the doors and we ran inside, leaving the car running. "Call the police," I shouted at the clerk. "Someone's following us." The clerk, a bored-looking kid, glanced outside. "What car?" The white sedan was gone. Our Honda sat alone under the fluorescent lights, engine ticking as it cooled. Ashley and I stood there shaking while the clerk called the police. They came, took our statement, looked at us like we were crazy. No white sedan on any of the traffic cameras. No reports of hitchhikers on Highway 50. We got a motel room in Fallon, too scared to keep driving. The next morning, I did some Googling on my phone. Found a forum post from 2018, someone describing the exact same experience. White sedan, repeated hitchhiker, signs with names. Then another from 2015, another from 2012. Always on that stretch of Highway 50, always ending when they reached Fallon. But here's what made my blood run cold. Every story ended the same way. We were lucky we didn't stop. Except for one. A post from 2009 where someone said they'd picked up the hitchhiker. The post was just one more line. "She's still with us. We can't make her leave. Please don't stop for her." Ashley and I drove home on I-80, adding 3 hours to our trip. We didn't talk much. We broke up a month later. Officially because of different life goals, but really because every time we looked at each other, we remembered. She moved to Portland. I still live in Sacramento, but I've never driven Highway 50 again. Sometimes I have nightmares about what would have happened if we'd stopped. I see Ashley and me in an endless loop on that empty highway, picking up hitchhiker after hitchhiker, our car getting fuller and fuller with smiling passengers who all have the same face. And somewhere behind us, 3 car lengths back, another couple debates whether to stop for 2 people holding a sign with their names on it. I don't know what she was, but I know she's still out there, waiting on the loneliest road in America. And I know that somewhere, sometime, someone's going to stop. They always do eventually. The security guard. I need to tell someone about Marcus before I convince myself it didn't happen. He was the night security guard at my office building in downtown Kansas City, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't entirely human. I first met Marcus in October 2022, when I started staying late to finish a project. I worked for a mid-sized marketing firm on the 14th floor, and our company had a strict policy about working after hours. You had to sign in with security. Marcus worked the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift, Sunday through Thursday. He was probably mid-40s, average height, always impeccably dressed in his security uniform. The thing that stood out was how he moved. Too smooth, like he was gliding instead of walking. And his eyes were this pale grey that seemed to shift colour in different lights. At first, I thought he was just exceptionally good at his job. He always knew when someone was in the building, down to which floor and office. "Working late again, Sarah," he'd say as I signed in. "Don't forget to take breaks. The vending machines on 12 are fully stocked." Normal security guard stuff, except he'd say it before I'd even told him I was hungry. The other late-night workers whispered about him. Janet from accounting swore he'd appeared on her floor during a power outage, navigating in pitch darkness like he could see perfectly. Tom from IT claimed Marcus had once mentioned details about Tom's weekend plans that he'd never shared with anyone at work. But we all agreed he was harmless, even helpful. He'd walk female employees to their cars, always seemed to know when someone forgot their keys, and once talked a suicidal janitor down from the roof. Everything changed the night I got trapped in the elevator. It was a Thursday in November, around 9 p.m. I was alone on 14, heading down to grab food from the vending machines. The elevator lurched to a stop between floors 10 and 11. The lights flickered, emergency lighting kicked in, and I pressed the call button. Nothing. My cell had no signal. I was about to start panicking when I heard Marcus's voice through the speaker. "Sarah, stay calm. I'll have you out in a moment." "Marcus? Thank God. Can you call the elevator company?" "No need. Just breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It was such a weird response that I actually did it. As I breathed, I heard him humming through the speaker, this low, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The elevator shuddered and then smoothly started moving again. When the doors opened on the ground floor, Marcus was standing there, not even slightly out of breath, despite the fact that he would have had to run down 14 flights of stairs to beat the elevator. "How did you—" "Lucky timing," he said with a smile that didn't reach those grey eyes. "You should head home. The building's in a mood tonight." I know how insane this sounds, but the building did feel different, like it was holding its breath. I grabbed my stuff and left, but I couldn't stop thinking about the humming, the way the elevator had responded to it. I started paying closer attention to Marcus. He was always in the building, even on his supposed nights off. Once, I saw him on camera footage entering the building on a Saturday afternoon, but he never signed in and never left. When I asked him about it Monday, he just smiled and said, "I must have been mistaken." Then there was the night with the stalker. I'd been dealing with this creep who'd wait outside the building for me. Real winner. Flowers, love notes, the whole delusional package. I'd filed police reports, but they couldn't do much since he hadn't technically threatened me. One night in December, I stayed extra late, hoping he'd give up and leave. When I finally headed down at 11 p.m., Marcus was waiting by the security desk. "He's still out there," Marcus said. "Would you like me to handle it?" I hadn't even told him about the stalker. "How did you— Never mind. Can you just walk me to my car?" "I can do better than that." He stepped outside, and I watched through the glass doors. The stalker was there, leaning against a lamppost. Marcus walked up to him, said something I couldn't hear. The stalker's face went from cocky to confused to absolutely terrified in the span of seconds. He backed away, then turned and ran. Actually ran. Marcus came back inside, straightening his tie. "He won't bother you again." "What did you say to him?" I showed him what happens to people who threaten those under my protection. The way he said it made my skin crawl, but true to his word, I never saw the stalker again. The police called a week later to say he turned himself in for unrelated warrants in another state, babbling about needing to get as far from Kansas City as possible. The breaking point came during the ice storm in January. The whole city shut down, but I'd stupidly tried to make it to work to grab my laptop. The building was empty, except for Marcus, of course. Power was flickering, and I could hear the ice crackling against the windows. I was heading back to the elevator when the lights went out completely. In the absolute darkness, I heard Marcus's voice right beside me, even though he'd been at his desk a second before. "Don't move, Sarah. The building's shifting." I felt his hand on my arm, ice cold even through my coat, guiding me. We walked through pitch blackness, but he never hesitated, never bumped into anything. I could hear sounds I couldn't identify. Creaking that sounded almost like breathing, whispers that might have been wind, or might not. "What are you?" I whispered. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I'm exactly what this building needs me to be. I've been here since the foundation was poured in 1923. I'll be here when they tear it down. And in between, I keep the people inside safe. We reached the stairwell, which had emergency lighting. In the dim glow, Marcus looked different, older. His shadow on the wall had too many angles, and for just a second, I swear I saw the building's blueprints tattooed under his skin like living architectural drawings. "Go home, Sarah," he said, "and maybe look into that remote work option your company offers." I took his advice, turned in my notice the next week, told them I was moving for family reasons. I work from home now, different company, different city, but sometimes I check the news from Kansas City and I notice things. How that office building never has serious accidents, how the crime rate drops to zero within a 2-block radius, how every few years someone posts on Reddit about the security guard who seems to know things he shouldn't. Last month, my old co-worker Janet called, said they were renovating the lobby, and when they pulled up the old tile, they found a photo sealed in the foundation, a security team from 1923. The photo dated from the building's opening. Marcus was in it. Same face, same pale eyes, same uniform style adjusted for the era. Janet asked if I remembered him, if I'd noticed anything strange. I told her no. He was just a really dedicated security guard. Because what else could I say? That I think the building has a guardian spirit? That Marcus is some kind of genius Loti tied to that specific place, keeping watch through the decades? I don't go back to Kansas City, but sometimes, late at night, I dream about that building. I dream about Marcus making his rounds, checking doors, watching cameras, humming that strange tune that makes elevators behave. And in the dreams, he always looks up at exactly the right camera and waves, like he knows I'm watching. Like he's still keeping an eye on me, even from 1,000 miles away. The trail camera. This happened last summer when I was 28. I'd been hired to do wildlife surveys for the State Park Service in northern Michigan, cataloging deer populations and migration patterns. It was a dream job for someone with a wildlife biology degree and massive student loans. Decent pay, lots of time outdoors, and a free cabin on the edge of the Huron National Forest. The job was straightforward. Maintain a network of 30 trail cameras spread across 50 square miles of forest, download the photos weekly, categorize the wildlife, and write reports. I'd been doing it for about 6 weeks without incident. The isolation was actually nice after years of cramped apartment living in grad school. Just me, the forest, and thousands of photos of deer butts and the occasional bear. My routine was simple. Monday through Thursday, I'd hike out to different camera locations, swapping memory cards and batteries. Fridays were for data entry and reports. Weekends, I'd drive the 40 minutes to town for supplies and human interaction. The nearest neighbor was a retired park ranger named Bill, about 3 miles down the dirt road. He'd check on me occasionally, making sure I hadn't been eaten by anything. It was late July when I noticed the first anomaly. I was reviewing photos from Camera Station 17, one of the deeper forest locations. Between the usual parade of deer and raccoons, there was a photo that made me pause. It showed the forest at night, infrared making everything ghostly white, but in the background, barely visible between the trees, was a human figure, just standing there, facing the camera. I zoomed in, but couldn't make out details. Probably just a hiker who'd gotten turned around, I figured. It happens sometimes, though that camera was a good 5 miles from any marked trail. I made a note in my log and kept scrolling. 20 photos later, there they were again. same position, same pose. The timestamp showed 3 hours had passed between photos. Now I was curious. I went through every photo from that camera for the past week. The figure appeared in 43 photos over 6 days. Always at night, always in that same spot. Never moving, never any clearer, just watching. The rational part of my brain said it had to be a glitch, maybe a weird tree formation that looked human in infrared. But trees don't appear and disappear. I decided to check the camera in person. Wednesday morning, I hiked out to Station 17 with fresh batteries and a new memory card. The camera was fine, no signs of tampering. I scrolled through the photos on the LCD screen. Normal, normal, normal. Then my blood went cold. The last photo, taken an hour before I'd arrived, showed me approaching through the trees, but I'd come from the opposite direction. I spun around, scanning the forest. Nothing but trees and undergrowth in every direction. Birds singing, squirrels chattering, all normal forest sounds. But I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. I swapped the cards quickly and got out of there, hiking faster than was probably safe on the uneven terrain. Back at the cabin, I uploaded the new photos with shaking hands. The figure was in 12 more photos, but now it was closer to the camera. Close enough that I could make out more details. Definitely human-shaped, wearing what looked like regular hiking clothes, but the face was always obscured, either by shadow or branches, or just slightly out of focus. Then I found the photo that changed everything. In it, the figure was holding something up toward the camera. I zoomed in, enhanced it as much as the software would allow. It was a photograph of me, sitting at my desk in the cabin, taken through the window. The timestamp on the trail camera photo was from 2 nights ago. I'd been sitting at that desk 2 nights ago, working late on reports, curtains wide open, because who was going to see me in the middle of nowhere? I called Bill immediately, told him about the photos. He drove over within the hour, studied the images with a grim expression. "You need to call the state police," he said. "This isn't some lost hiker. This is targeted." While we waited for the police, Bill helped me check around the cabin. We found boot prints under my bedroom window, fresh scratches on the door frame like someone had tried to jimmy the lock. The worst part was finding my own trail cameras, 3 of them set up in the woods around my cabin, all pointing at my windows. They weren't state property. Someone had been watching me for weeks. The state police took it seriously, especially after seeing the photos. They swept the forest around Station 17, but found nothing except some disturbed undergrowth. No camps, no vehicles, no trace of whoever it was. They increased patrols, told me to stay somewhere else for a while. But I had a job to do, cameras to check, reports to file. I stayed with Bill for a few nights, but I couldn't do my job from his place. Eventually, I had to go back. The police had installed new locks, motion lights, even a panic button that would bring them running. I kept all the curtains closed, doors locked, bear spray within reach at all times. For a week, nothing happened. No figure in the photos, no signs of anyone around the cabin. I started to relax, thinking maybe the police presence had scared them off. Then Thursday came, time to check Station 17 again. I almost called in sick, almost told my supervisor the camera was broken, but I couldn't live in fear forever. I brought bear spray and a satellite phone, hiked in at midday when the forest was brightest. The camera was still there, still functioning. I swapped the cards with trembling fingers, not even checking the photos. Just wanted to get in and out. That's when I heard it, a camera shutter clicking behind me. I spun around. Nothing there. Click from the left, click from the right. click, click, click surrounding me. I ran, crashed through the undergrowth like a spooked deer, branches tearing at my clothes. The clicking followed, always just behind me, just out of sight. I burst onto the trail and kept running until my legs gave out. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, the forest was silent again. I made it back to my truck and drove straight to the police station. Told them I was done, quitting, leaving the state. They tried to convince me to stay, to help catch whoever it was, but I was finished. Some jobs aren't worth your life. I packed that night, stayed in a motel, and drove back to Ohio the next morning. My supervisor was understanding, said they'd had trouble keeping that position filled anyway. Bill shipped my things a few weeks later. I found work with a consulting firm doing environmental impact assessments. Nice, safe work with lots of people around. But here's what haunts me. When Bill was packing my stuff, he checked the trail cameras one last time. Station 17's final photos showed me running through the forest, taken from multiple angles like there'd been a dozen cameras hidden in the trees. But the last photo was different. It was taken inside my abandoned cabin, showing my empty desk. Written in the dust on the monitor were 2 words. Come back. I won't. I've changed my name, moved twice, deleted all social media. But sometimes I get job offers for remote positions, wildlife work in isolated places. The cover letters are always generic, but they mention specific details about my experience in Michigan. Details I've never put on my resume. I work in an office now, surrounded by people, security cameras everywhere. But sometimes when I'm reviewing environmental photos for work, I'll catch something in the background. A figure, standing between the trees, just out of focus. Different forests, different states, but always the same pose. Always watching. I don't think they were after me specifically. I think I was just convenient, isolated, observable. A subject for whatever sick project they were conducting. But knowing that doesn't make me feel safer. It makes me wonder how many other people have seen figures in the backgrounds of their photos. How many have noticed too late? I don't hike anymore. Don't camp, don't hunt. Don't even walk in city parks after dark. Because somewhere out there, in some forest, cameras are clicking. And sooner or later, we all end up in someone's photos. The piano teacher. I've only recently been able to talk about what happened when I was 12. My therapist says writing it down might help process the experience, so here goes. In 2006, my parents signed me up for piano lessons. We just moved to a suburb outside Columbus, and Mum thought it would help me make friends. The teacher, Mrs. Horvath, came highly recommended. She taught half the kids in the neighborhood from her home studio, had a wall full of competition certificates, and charged reasonable rates. She was probably in her 50s, always dressed professionally, with this rigid posture that made you sit up straighter just looking at her. The lessons started normally enough. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m., I'd walk the 6 blocks to her house, a tidy colonial with perfect landscaping. Her studio was in the finished basement, soundproofed and windowless, with 2 grand pianos and walls lined with sheet music. She was strict but fair, demanding perfection but praising improvement. My parents were thrilled when I quickly progressed from basic scales to simple Mozart pieces. What I didn't tell them was how Mrs. Horvath watched me, not just during lessons, but all the time. I'd see her car parked outside my school, find her accidentally shopping at the same grocery store as my mum. Once, I caught her taking photos of our house from across the street. When I mentioned it to my mum, she laughed it off. She's probably just proud of her student. You're doing so well. The real strangeness started about 3 months in. Mrs. Horvath began asking personal questions during lessons. What time did I go to bed? What did I eat for breakfast? Who were my friends? Did I have any siblings? I didn't. She'd take notes while I answered, writing in this leather journal she always kept nearby. When I practiced, she'd stand too close, sometimes touching my shoulders or arms to correct my posture. Her hands were always ice cold. Then came the recital preparation. She insisted I needed extra practice, special sessions on Saturdays. My parents agreed. They wanted me to excel. During these longer lessons, things got progressively weirder. She'd have me play the same piece over and over, sometimes for an hour straight, while she sat in the corner writing in her journal. She installed a new lock on the studio door to prevent interruptions. Started offering me homemade cookies and tea that tasted bitter and made me sleepy. One Saturday, I pretended to drink the tea, but poured it into a potted plant when she wasn't looking. That's when I discovered what she did during those long practice sessions. As I played, she pulled out a camera and started taking photos. Not of my hands on the keys, but of my face, my profile, close-ups that felt invasive. She had hundreds of photos spread across a table, all of me, at school, at home, playing in the yard. Some were taken through my bedroom window. I stopped playing, and she smiled this horrible smile. "Don't stop, Daniel. You play so beautifully when you're relaxed." I mumbled something about needing the bathroom. She unlocked the door, but followed me up the stairs, waiting outside while I used the powder room. That's when I noticed the wall of photos in the hallway. Not just me. Dozens of young students over the years, all boys, all around my age. Some of the photos were old, dating back decades. In every set, the photos progressed the same way. Normal lesson photos, then candids taken without knowledge, then increasingly invasive shots. I knew I had to get out. I flushed the toilet, ran the water, then quietly opened the bathroom window. It was a small window, but I was a skinny kid. I squeezed through, dropped into her side yard, and ran. Behind me, I could hear her calling my name, first sweetly, then angry, then desperately. I ran straight home and told my parents everything. They didn't believe me at first. Mrs. Horvath was so respected, so professional. But when she showed up at our door 20 minutes later, wild-eyed and demanding I finish my lesson, even they could see something was wrong. She had my sheet music clutched in her hands, kept saying I was special and couldn't waste my gift. My dad threatened to call the police. Mrs. Horvath left, but not before looking directly at me and saying, "You can't stop the music, Daniel. It's inside you now." My parents finally called the police when we found her in our backyard that night, standing under my bedroom window, humming the Mozart piece I'd been learning. The investigation revealed the extent of her obsession. The basement studio had a hidden room with walls covered in photos of students spanning 30 years. She had detailed journals about each boy, their routines, their families, their likes and dislikes. My journal was the thickest. The police also found sedatives in her tea collection and recording equipment throughout her house. She'd been drugging students and recording them during vulnerable moments. Some of the older boys in the photos were contacted. Several reported similar experiences, but had been too ashamed or scared to speak up. Mrs. Horvath was arrested, but was released on bail. The night before her trial, she disappeared. The police found her car by a lake 50 miles away, but no body. The official report listed her as presumed dead, but I never believed it. For years afterward, I'd hear piano music in the middle of the night. My parents said it was just neighbors or my imagination, but I knew that rigid, perfect playing style. We moved when I was 16, then again, when I left for college. But sometimes, I'd still catch glimpses of a woman who looked like her, at concerts, in music stores, always watching. I'm 30 now, married, living in Seattle. I haven't touched a piano in 18 years, but last month, a flyer appeared under my apartment door. Piano lessons for gifted students. First lesson free. Ask for Mrs. H. The phone number was disconnected when I tried to call. The address led to an empty lot, but I know she's out there, teaching new students, taking new photos, writing in new journals. I've reported it to the police, but what can they do about someone who's supposed to be dead? I write this as a warning. If your child's music teacher seems too interested, too involved, trust your instincts. Watch for the signs, the extra lessons, the personal questions, the way they look at your child like they're collecting them. And if your child tells you something's wrong, believe them the first time. Because somewhere out there, Mrs. Horvath is still teaching, still watching, still humming that Mozart piece in the dark, waiting for her special students to come back. I still hear it sometimes, that piece I never finished learning. It follows me in elevators, in waiting rooms, wherever there's ambient music. Just a few bars, just enough to remind me. The music is inside me, just like she said, and I don't think it will ever stop. The previous tenant. The apartment seemed perfect when I found it on Craigslist. Third floor unit in a converted Victorian in Portland's Hawthorne district. Original hardwood floors, clawfoot tub, and $400 below market rate. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, mentioned the previous tenant had left suddenly after living there for 8 years. Left everything behind, she said, which is why the rent was reduced. She needed someone who could deal with clearing out his belongings. I was 31, fresh out of a relationship, and desperate to find my own place. The boxes stacked in the spare bedroom didn't bother me. I figured I'd sort through them gradually, donate what I could, toss the rest. My cat Juniper loved the big windows and built-in shelving. For the first month, everything was ideal. I worked from home as a graphic designer, so I quickly settled into a routine. Coffee at 7, work until noon, lunch break to walk the neighborhood, work until 6. Evenings were for Netflix or reading, Juniper purring on my lap. The neighbors were quiet professionals who kept to themselves. The only oddity was the mail. I kept getting packages for the previous tenant, David Kellner. Amazon deliveries, meal kits, even magazine subscriptions. I'd mark them return to sender and leave them for the mailman. The first real incident happened on a Tuesday afternoon in November. I was deep in a project when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Not unusual in an apartment building, except these stopped right outside my door. No knock, no movement, just silence. I peered through the peephole, nobody there. Figuring it was a delivery person, I went back to work. 20 minutes later, the doorknob rattled. Someone was trying their key. I yanked the door open to find a man in his 40s, medium build, holding a key ring. He looked as surprised as I was. "Oh," he said, I'm sorry. I must have the wrong apartment." "This is 3B, I said. He stared at me for a long moment, then at the interior of the apartment visible behind me. "Right. My mistake." He turned and walked down the hall, but I noticed he didn't try any other doors. That night, I asked Mrs. Chen about David Kellner. She got this uncomfortable look and changed the subject. Said he'd been a quiet tenant, no problems, just left one day without notice. When I pressed for details, She mentioned he'd been going through some things and left it at that. I started paying more attention to his belongings in the spare room. Most boxes contained normal stuff, books, DVDs, kitchen gadgets. But one box was different, full of notebooks, each one filled with the same repetitive writing. This is my home. I live at 3B. This is where I belong. Pages and pages of it, the handwriting getting progressively more erratic. The next week, I woke up at 3 a.m. to Juniper growling at the bedroom door. She never growled. I lay still, listening. There it was, a key in the lock, the deadbolt turning. But I'd installed a chain lock after the hallway incident. The door opened 2 inches and stopped. I heard frustrated breathing. Then the door pulled closed. The footsteps retreated. I called the police, but what could I say? Someone had a key to my apartment? The landlord had probably given out dozens over the years. They took a report, suggested I change the locks. Mrs. Chen agreed to cover the cost, looking more worried than the situation seemed to warrant. But the visits continued. Always at night. Always the same pattern. Key in lock. Door hits chain. Frustrated pause, retreat. I set up a camera in the hallway with Mrs. Chen's permission. But it only caught a figure in dark clothing. Face hidden by a hood. Could have been anyone. Then I found the other notebooks. Hidden behind his books, wrapped in plastic. These were different. Detailed observations about the apartment. The exact time sunlight hit each window. The patterns of settling noises the building made. Temperature readings for every room at different times of day. And in the back of one notebook, a floor plan of the apartment with modifications penciled in. Future bathroom access. Planned kitchen expansion. New closet here. He'd been planning to live here forever. The escalation came in December. I'd been out with friends, came home around midnight to find my door wide open. The chain lock had been cut. Nothing stolen, but things were adjusted. Every piece of furniture moved exactly 3 inches to the left. Every picture frame tilted at the same angle. My work files reorganized alphabetically. Juniper was hiding under the bed, fur standing on end. In the spare room, his boxes had been opened and the contents arranged on the floor in neat patterns. The notebooks were displayed prominently, open to pages about coming home. And on my computer monitor, a sticky note. You're keeping it warm for me. I stayed in a hotel that night, Juniper carriers in tow. The next day, I hired movers and put my stuff in storage. Told Mrs. Chen I was breaking the lease, showed her the photos. She didn't argue, just looked sad and refunded my deposit. He lived here for 8 years, she said quietly. His mother owned this building, left it to me when she died. David had problems. I tried to help him, but when he stopped taking his medication, he became convinced the apartment was alive, that it needed him. I had to evict him, but he never really left, I finished. She nodded. I've tried renting it 3 times. You lasted the longest. I found a new place across town, a modern building with electronic locks and security cameras. But sometimes I check the old Craigslist ads, and sure enough, 3B is always there. The rent gets lower each time it's posted. The descriptions get more desperate. Charming Victorian apartment, some quirks, perfect for the understanding tenant. Last month, curiosity got the better of me. I drove by the old building at night. The lights in 3B were on, shadows moving behind the curtains. But Mrs. Chen had told me it was vacant. I sat there watching until I saw him in the window. David, arranging furniture, watering plants, living his life in an empty apartment. Or maybe it's not empty anymore. Maybe he finally found a way back home. Maybe the apartment wanted him back as much as he wanted to be there. Maybe some places choose their occupants and everyone else is just keeping them warm. I don't know, and I don't want to know. I just know that sometimes when I'm working late at night, I catch myself writing the same phrase over and over in my margins. This is my home. This is where I belong. I always tear those pages out and burn them, just to be safe. The Night Janitor. This happened when I was 23, working the graveyard shift at a medical office building in Denver. I just graduated with a useless degree and mountains of debt. So when I saw the posting for a night janitor position paying $22 an hour, I jumped on it. The hours were 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Sunday through Thursday. Perfect for someone with no social life and a need for money. The building was 12 stories of identical medical offices, dentists, dermatologists, general practitioners. My job was simple. Empty trash, vacuum, clean bathrooms, mop floors. Each floor took about 45 minutes if I hustled. The building manager, Carl, gave me a master key and a list of which offices to clean which nights. Easy money. For the first month, it was actually kind of peaceful. Just me, my earbuds, and mindless work. The building was dead quiet at night, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional settling of the structure. I'd work my way from the top floor down, saving the lobby for last. The only weird rule was about the 6th floor. Carl had been very specific. Don't clean suite 612, ever. It's not on your list. The tenant handles their own cleaning. When I'd asked why, he just shrugged and said the tenant was particular about privacy. Fine by me, less work. But after a few weeks, I started noticing things about 612. The frosted glass door was the only one in the building with no nameplate, just the number. Light always seeped out from under the door, even at 3 a.m. And sometimes, when I was mopping the 6th floor hallway, I'd hear movement inside. Footsteps, chairs scraping, what sounded like multiple voices having muffled conversations. One night in November, curiosity got the better of me. It was around 2 a.m., and I was cleaning the bathroom across from 612. The voices inside were louder than usual, almost argumentative. I turned off my music and crept closer to the door. The voices stopped immediately, like someone had hit mute. Then I heard footsteps approaching the door from inside. I scrambled back to my cart, grabbed the mop, tried to look busy. The door to 612 opened, and a man stepped out. Middle-aged, wearing a janitor's uniform identical to mine. He looked at me with tired eyes and said, "You're new." "Started last month," I said, confused. I didn't know there was another janitor. He smiled sadly. "There isn't. Not anymore." Then he walked past me to the stairwell and disappeared through the door. I heard his footsteps going up, not down. I finished the 6th floor in record time and moved on, but I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. When I was cleaning the 8th floor an hour later, I heard the stairwell door open. Footsteps in the hallway. I peeked out of the office I was cleaning and saw the janitor from 612 pushing a cleaning cart identical to mine, working his way down the hall. "Hey!" I called out. "I thought you said..." He turned to look at me, and his face was different. Younger, maybe early 30s, but wearing the same uniform. "You must have me confused with someone else," he said. "I've been cleaning this floor for years." I watched him enter an office and start emptying trash cans. The whole thing felt wrong, but I had my own work to finish. When I came back to check an hour later, he was gone. No card, no sign he'd ever been there. The offices he'd been cleaning were still messy, trash cans full. This pattern continued for weeks. Every time I worked, I'd encounter janitors I'd never seen before, all wearing the same uniform, all claiming to have worked there for years. Sometimes they were old, sometimes young. Different races, different builds, but always that same tired look in their eyes. They'd clean for a while, then vanish. The work they did would be undone by morning. I started keeping track. Counted 17 different janitors over 3 weeks. Asked Carl about it, but he just looked confused. "You're the only night janitor," he insisted. "Has been that way for months." Then came the night I'll never forget. December 15, around 3:30 a.m. I was on the 4th floor when I heard my name being called from the stairwell. Not shouted, just spoken conversationally, like someone was having a discussion about me. I followed the voice up to the 6th floor. The door to 612 was wide open. Inside, I could see a break room. Tables, chairs, a coffee machine. And janitors. Dozens of them, all in uniform, sitting around like they were on break. All the faces I'd seen over the past weeks, plus more I didn't recognize. They were all looking at something on the far wall. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The janitors didn't react to my presence, just kept staring. I followed their gaze and felt my blood turn to ice. The wall was covered in ID badges, employee photos and names, all janitors dating back decades. In the center, circled in red marker, was mine. But the photo was wrong. It showed me older, grayer, with those same tired eyes. "That's your future," a voice said behind me. I spun around to find the first janitor I'd met, the middle-aged one. "We all started like you, young, needing money, working alone at night. But this building, it collects night workers, keeps us cleaning forever, even after we're gone." "That's insane," I said. He gestured to the room. "Look around. You think we're all here by choice? Some of us have been dead for years. Check the obituaries if you don't believe me. But every night we come back, clean our assigned floors, punch in, punch out, forever." I backed toward the door, but it had closed. The janitors were all standing now, moving closer. Their uniforms were clean but wrong. Some were styles from the 80s. Others had company logos that didn't exist anymore. "You can leave," the middle-aged janitor said. "Door's not locked, but you'll be back. We all come back. The building needs us, needs someone to keep it clean, keep it running. And night janitors, we're invisible. Perfect for collecting." I yanked the door open and ran. Took the stairs 3 at a time. Burst out of the building into the freezing December air. Drove home without looking back. Called Carl from my apartment and quit on the spot. He wasn't happy, but I didn't care. I found a day job within a week. Retail, terrible pay. But I needed to be around people and sunlight. Tried to forget about the building, about 612, about the janitors who couldn't leave. But last month, I was driving past the building late at night. Couldn't help but look up at the 6th floor. The lights were on in 612. Shadows moving behind the frosted glass. And in the window of the 8th floor, I saw a janitor, just for a second, silhouetted against the office lights. It was me, older, grayer, pushing a cart down the hallway like I'd never left. I don't know if it was a warning or a promise, but I know that somewhere in that building, in some version of reality, I'm still cleaning, still emptying trash cans and mopping floors, still part of the night shift that never ends. I work construction now, outside, in the sun, never alone. But sometimes I have dreams about fluorescent lights and empty hallways, about the soft squeak of a mop bucket and the jingle of keys, about a break room full of tired janitors who can't clock out. And in those dreams, my ID badge is always circled in red, waiting for me to claim it. The visitor. This happened 5 years ago, when I was 26. My husband Tom and I had just moved into our first house, a little ranch-style place in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a big backyard that backed up to a wooded area. We were so proud, so excited to finally have our own space after years of cramped apartments. The first few months were blissful. We painted rooms, planted a garden, got a puppy named Rosie. Tom worked days as an electrician while I worked nights at the hospital as a nurse. It wasn't ideal, but the offset schedules meant someone was always home with Rosie, and we needed both incomes for the mortgage. It started in October. I was getting ready for my shift around 10 p.m. when Rosie started growling at the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. Not her usual alert bark when she saw a squirrel, but a low, continuous growl I'd never heard from her before. The back porch light was on, but I couldn't see anything unusual in the yard. "What is it, girl?" I asked. But she just pressed herself against my legs, still growling. I flipped on all the outside lights and peered through the glass. Nothing, just our yard and the dark tree line beyond. But Rosie wouldn't calm down until I closed the curtains. Even then, she spent the rest of the evening glued to my side, ears back, occasionally whimpering. When Tom got home the next morning, I mentioned Rosie's behavior. He figured it was probably a coyote, or maybe a deer. We'd seen both in the neighborhood before. He promised to check the yard when he got up, maybe put up a motion light to scare off whatever wildlife was spooking the dog. But when he checked that afternoon, he found something odd. Scratches on the sliding door, about 5 feet up. 4 parallel lines, too high for Rosie, too deliberate to be accidental. And in the flower bed below, a single footprint, human-shaped but wrong. Too long, with what looked like claw marks at the ends of the toes. We told ourselves it was kids playing pranks. Halloween was coming up, after all. Tom installed a motion light and a security camera aimed at the back door. I started leaving more lights on when I left for work. Rosie remained anxious, especially at night. The next incident was a week later. I'd just gotten home from my shift around 7:30 a.m., exhausted after a particularly rough night in the ER. Tom had already left for work. I let Rosie out back for her morning bathroom break and went to change out of my scrubs. When I came back 5 minutes later, Rosie was at the door, pawing frantically to get in. She shot past me the second I opened it and hid under the kitchen table. In the yard, right in the middle of our lawn, was another footprint. Fresh in the morning dew, pointing toward the house. I checked the security footage. At 7:27 a.m., while I was changing, something had crossed the yard. The camera caught maybe 2 seconds of movement. Pale, hunched, moving on all fours but wrong. Like a person crawling, but with limbs that bent in too many places. It moved from the tree line to the middle of the yard, paused, then retreated. The timestamp showed this happened while Rosie was outside. I called Tom, hands shaking. He came home immediately. We watched the footage together over and over, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. Tom wanted to call the police, but what would we say? That something crawled across our yard. They'd think we were crazy. Instead, we got more cameras, covered every angle of the property. Tom took a few days off work, and we agreed I'd switch to day shift as soon as possible. But the hospital was short-staffed, and it would be at least a month before they could accommodate the change. 2 nights later, I woke up to Tom shaking me. It was 3 a.m., my night off. He was pale, pointing at our bedroom window. "There's something on the roof," he whispered. We lay there, hardly breathing, listening to something moving above us. Slow, deliberate steps, like it was pacing, then scratching, long, drawn-out sounds like nails on shingles. Rosie was under the bed, completely silent. Tom grabbed his phone to check the cameras. The roof cam showed nothing. Whatever was up there was avoiding the camera's field of view, but we could hear it, feel the vibrations through the ceiling. After about 20 minutes, the sounds moved to the edge of the roof and stopped. In the morning, we found more scratches. On the siding, around our bedroom window, on the roof tiles. Always in sets of 4. The pattern was deliberate, almost artistic, like something was marking territory. We stayed with Tom's parents for a few days after that. Told them we were having the house fumigated, but we had to go back eventually. We couldn't afford a hotel, and we couldn't explain why we were really scared. Who would believe us? The night we returned, we found a pile of small animals on our back porch. Mice, birds, a squirrel, all arranged in a neat circle, all with their necks broken. In the center was a note, written in mud on a piece of bark, "Thank you for the dog." We packed up Rosie and left immediately. Stayed in our car in a Walmart parking lot while we figured out what to do. But here's the thing about mortgages. You can't just walk away. We had all our money tied up in that house. We had to go back. Tom installed bars on all the windows. We adopted 2 more dogs, big ones. Put up floodlights that turned the yard bright as day. For a while, it seemed to work. No more footprints, no more scratches, no more gifts. We started to relax, even joked about our raccoon problem. Then I came home from a shift to find Tom sitting on the front porch with all 3 dogs, pale and shaking. He showed me his phone, a video from our bedroom camera, time-stamped from an hour earlier. The bedroom window was open. We always kept them locked now. Something pale and skinny was folding itself through the opening, limbs bending in ways that made my stomach turn. It crawled across our bedroom ceiling like a spider, hung above our bed for a full minute, then retreated the way it came. The window closed behind it. It was inside, Tom kept saying. It can get inside whenever it wants. We left that night and never went back. Walked away from the mortgage, ruined our credit, moved in with family. Everyone thought we were crazy, throwing away our dream home over what? We couldn't explain. How do you tell people that something inhuman has decided it likes your house, your yard, your life? The bank foreclosed 6 months later. I checked the real estate listings sometimes. The house has been sold 3 times in the 5 years since we left. Never stays occupied for more than a few months. The listings always mention motivated sellers and price reduced. Last year, Tom found a forum online for people with similar experiences. Pale crawlers, they're called. Nobody knows what they are. Some say they're cave dwellers that got displaced by development. Others think they're something older, something that was here before us. All I know is they're real, they're smart, and once they choose a territory, they don't leave. We rent an apartment now, 3rd floor, in the middle of the city. No yard, no trees, no sliding glass doors. Rosie's getting older, but she's still nervous at night, still checks corners before entering rooms. We've never talked about having kids. How could we, when we know what's out there? When we know how easily it can get inside? Sometimes I dream about the house. In the dreams, I'm walking through our old backyard at night, following footprints in the dew. They lead to the tree line where something pale waits on all fours, smiling with too many teeth. It speaks in Tom's voice, tells me it's kept my room just how I left it, says it's been waiting for me to come home. I always wake up before I follow it into the trees, but each time I get a little closer. Each time it gets a little harder to remember why I shouldn't go. The apartment is safe, the city is safe, we're safe, we're safe. We have to be. The duplicate. This happened 3 months ago, and I'm still trying to make sense of it. I work as a software developer in Austin, Texas, mostly from home since the pandemic. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment downtown, 15th floor. Decent view of the city. My life is routine. Wake up, code, meetings, gym, sleep, repeat. Boring but comfortable. It was a Thursday in August when things went sideways. I just finished a sprint review and decided to grab lunch from the taco place downstairs. Took the elevator down, walked through the lobby. Normal day. But when I got to the restaurant, the girl at the counter looked confused. "Back already?" she asked. "You forget something." I hadn't been there in days. Told her she must be thinking of someone else. She shrugged, took my order, but kept giving me weird looks. Whatever. People make mistakes. On the way back to my apartment, the security guard did the same thing. "That was quick," he said. I just smiled and nodded, figured he was confused too. But when I got to my door, my key wouldn't work. The lock had been changed. I could see fresh scratch marks on the metal. I was about to call the building manager when the door opened from inside, and there I was, standing in my doorway, wearing my clothes, holding my coffee mug with the Python logo. Same face, same build, same everything. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably 3 seconds. "You're early," the other me said. Then I closed the door in my face. I stood in that hallway for God knows how long, trying to process what I'd just seen. Finally, knocked again, harder. No answer. Called my own phone from my cell. It rang inside the apartment, but nobody picked up. I could hear movement inside, drawers opening, footsteps. My footsteps, but not mine. Building management didn't believe me. Why would they? I was clearly standing right there, not locked out of my apartment. The security footage proved it. There I was, entering my apartment an hour ago, no problems. They threatened to call the police if I didn't stop harassing the tenant. I spent that night in a hotel, mind racing. Carbon monoxide poisoning, psychotic break, elaborate prank. None of it made sense. The next morning, I went back to the building. The security guard waved at me cheerfully. "Morning, Mr. Chen. Forgot your gym bag yesterday." He held up a bag, my bag, the one I'd left in my apartment. I took it numbly, went to a coffee shop to think. Inside the bag were my gym clothes, my wallet, which I already had in my pocket, and a note in my handwriting. "Stop coming back. It's not your turn anymore." I tried calling work, but my boss said I'd been online all morning, crushing code reviews. Checked my GitHub, commits from that morning, my username, code that looked like mine, but that I hadn't written. My life was continuing without me. For a week, I followed myself, watched from across the street as I went to my gym, worked from my favorite coffee shop, met friends for drinks. It was me, but better, more confident, more social, smiled more. My friends didn't notice anything wrong. Why would they? He was me, just improved. I tried confronting him again outside the gym. Bad idea. He saw me coming, stepped into an alley. When I followed, he was waiting. "I'm not stealing your life," he said with my voice. "I'm borrowing it, just for a while." "Who are you?" He laughed. My laugh, but colder. "I'm you, just not from here. My world got complicated. Needed somewhere to lay low. Your life was perfect. Simple, isolated, routine. Nobody looks too close. You can't just take my life. I'm not taking it. I'm maintaining it. Your job's getting done. Your bills are paid. Your friends think you're fine. Better than fine. I've fixed there's that bug in the authentication system you've been putting off." Sarah from the 3rd floor finally agreed to that date you've been too scared to ask for. Sarah. I had been meaning to ask her out. "How long?" I asked. "Few more weeks. Maybe a month. Then I'll move on, find another life to borrow. You can have yours back. Improved even. I'm a better you than you are." I tried to grab him, to fight, but he moved like he knew what I was going to do before I did it. Because he did. He was me. "Don't make this difficult," he said, straightening his shirt. "There are worse versions of me out there. Ones that don't give lives back. Be grateful you got the polite one." He left me in that alley. I tried everything. Police, no crime committed. Lawyers, no case. Even a private investigator who found nothing suspicious. I was a ghost in my own life, watching someone else live it better. So I adapted. Got a cash job at a warehouse. Rented a shitty room across town. Kept tabs on my life from a distance. He was right. He was better at being me. Got promoted. Started dating Sarah. Even called my mum more often. It hurt to watch, but what could I do? Last week, I was walking past my old building when I saw him leaving. He made eye contact, nodded toward the alley. I followed, heart pounding. "Time's up," he said. "Thanks for the loan." "That's it? You're just leaving?" "Timeline's getting unstable. Too many versions of us in one place. Plus, Sarah's getting serious. That's a complication I don't need." He handed me my keys, my wallet, a folder. "Everything you need is in there. Passwords, work notes, even conversation summaries so you don't seem weird. Try to keep the improvements I made." "Wait," I called as he walked away. "How many of you, us, are there?" He turned back, smiled sadly. "Every choice creates a branch. Every branch creates a world. And sometimes, when things go wrong in those worlds, we jump. Right now, in this city alone, probably dozens. Living borrowed lives, being better or worse versions of ourselves. How do I know you're really gone? How do I know I'm the real me?" "You don't," he said. "None of us do. We're all just versions, trying to find a life that fits. Enjoy yours. I made it better." He walked around a corner and vanished. Not metaphorically. I followed immediately, and he was just gone. I moved back into my apartment that night. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, but cleaner, more organized. There were notes everywhere in my handwriting, catching me up on 3 months of improved life. Sarah and I are still dating. She mentions sometimes that I seemed different for a while, more confident, more focused. I just smile and say I was going through some stuff. She has no idea how true that is. But here's what keeps me up at night. If he could take my life so easily, if there are dozens of versions of us jumping between worlds, borrowing lives, how do I know I'm the original? How do I know I'm not just another version who jumped here so long ago I forgot? I check the mirrors sometimes, looking for signs I'm not who I think I am. I leave hidden notes for myself, make sure my handwriting stays consistent. But would I even know if another me took over? Would anyone? Last night, I saw someone who looked like me at the coffee shop. Same face, same clothes, but something in the eyes was different. Tired, desperate. He saw me looking and quickly left. I didn't follow. Maybe I should have. Maybe he needed help. Or maybe he was looking for a life to borrow. I've started leaving my apartment door unlocked sometimes, just in case there's a version of me out there who needs it more. Who could do better? Who could be the me I'm supposed to be? Because if the other me was right, if we're all just versions trying to find where we fit, then maybe the best thing I can do is be ready to step aside when a better me comes along. The note he left had one last line I didn't mention before. Check the closet, back left corner. I did. There's a small notebook there, filled with entries in my handwriting. Names, dates, cities, lives borrowed, lives returned. The last entry is mine. The notebook is only half full. The hospital basement. This happened when I was 25, during my urban exploration phase. My friend Malik and I had a YouTube channel where we'd explore abandoned buildings. Nothing special, maybe a few thousand subscribers, but we loved the thrill of discovering forgotten places. We'd done factories, schools, old houses. But in September 2021, we found out about Riverside Psychiatric Hospital in Pennsylvania, abandoned since the 90s. Riverside was legendary in the Urbex community. 5 stories plus a basement, 200 beds when operational, shut down after funding cuts and patient abuse scandals. The place had been empty for 30 years, slowly being reclaimed by nature. Perfect content for our channel. We drove up on a Saturday, parked a mile away, and hiked through the woods to avoid security. The exterior was exactly what we'd hoped for. Ivy-covered brick, broken windows, that perfect aesthetic of beautiful decay. We entered through a loading dock in the back, our headlamps cutting through the darkness. The first 3 floors were standard abandoned hospital fare. Peeling paint, collapsed ceilings, old medical equipment scattered around. We filmed everything, narrating in hushed voices about the history, the architecture, the tragedy of mental health funding. Found some cool stuff. Patient files from the 80s, old medications, a therapy room with padded walls still intact. It was when we found the basement access that things changed. The door was different from the others. Heavy steel with multiple deadbolts, all locked from the outside. Someone had spray painted "Do Not Enter" across it in red. But the locks were rusted, and Malik had bolt cutters. "This is gold," he whispered, camera ready. "Nobody's been down here in decades." The stairs descended into absolute blackness. Our light seemed weaker down there, swallowed by the dark. The basement was a maze of corridors, all identical concrete walls and floors. No windows, no natural light. The air was thick, stale, with an underlying smell like copper and mold. We found the first room about 50 feet in. Metal door with a small window, rusted open. Inside was what looked like an old operating room, but wrong. The table had restraints at odd angles, instruments I couldn't identify. The walls were covered in scratch marks, deep gouges in the concrete. Malik filmed while I tried not to think about what had happened here. "Probably ECT," Malik said, trying to sound clinical. "Electroshock therapy. They did some dark stuff in these old hospitals, but I'd researched Riverside extensively. they'd never done ECT here. This equipment was something else. We pushed deeper, finding more rooms. Each one stranger than the last. A room with mirrors on every surface, including the floor and ceiling. A room with dozens of mannequins arranged in a circle, all facing the center. A room that was completely empty, except for a single child's shoe in the exact center of the floor. Then we heard the singing, faint at first, echoing through the corridors. A woman's voice, humming a lullaby. We froze, lights whipping around, trying to locate the source. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Security? I whispered. Malik shook his head. Security doesn't sing lullabies in abandoned basements. We should have left then. Every instinct screamed to run. But we were young and stupid and thought we were brave. We followed the sound deeper into the maze. The singing got louder, clearer. Multiple voices now, harmonizing. Men, women, children, humming the same haunting melody. We turned a corner and found the source. A large room. Maybe a communal area once. In the center, arranged in a perfect circle, were people. Patients, by the look of their rotted hospital gowns. They sat cross-legged, holding hands, heads tilted back, singing. Here's the thing. They were long dead, mummified by the dry air, skin like leather, empty sockets where eyes should be, but their mouths moved, their chests rose and fell. They sang. Malik raised his camera with shaking hands. Through the viewfinder, the scene was even worse, because the camera picked up things our eyes didn't. Shadows moving behind the corpses, tall, thin shapes that weren't quite human, puppeting the bodies like marionettes. One of the corpses turned its head toward us. The singing stopped. "You're early," it said in a voice like grinding stone. "The show isn't until midnight." They all turned then, those eyeless faces tracking our movement. One by one, they stood up, movements jerky and wrong. The shadows behind them became clearer. Elongated figures with too many joints, faces that were just suggestions of features. We ran, sprinted back the way we came, chased by the sound of bare feet slapping concrete and that horrible humming starting again. The corridors that had seemed straightforward now twisted and turned. Doors we'd passed were gone, new ones appeared. The basement was changing, rearranging itself. Malik tripped over something in the dark. I grabbed him, pulled him up, and we kept running. Behind us, the singing grew louder, more voices joining the chorus. Not just the corpses now, but the walls themselves, the pipes, the very air humming that terrifying lullaby. We burst through a door and found ourselves in a room we hadn't seen before. Beds lined the walls, each occupied. The bodies here were fresher, months, not decades. Each one had a camera or phone clutched in dead hands. Urban explorers like us, all arranged peacefully, eyes closed, slight smiles on their faces. They stayed for the show, a voice said behind us. We spun around. One of the shadow figures stood in the doorway, barely fitting through the frame. Up close, I could see it wasn't solid. More like smoke, given form, constantly shifting and reforming. Midnight show's been running for 30 years, it continued. Ever since they locked us down here, sealed us in with the special patients, the ones they couldn't fix, couldn't kill, couldn't understand. We got lonely, started putting on performances for ourselves, but an audience, that makes it so much better. Malik was hyperventilating. I grabbed his arm, back toward the far wall. The shadow figure didn't move to stop us, just watched with its not quite face. "You can leave," it said. "Doors that way." but you'll be back. They all come back. The song stays with you, you see, burrows into your brain, and every night at midnight, you'll hear it, feel it calling you home. It stepped aside, gesturing down the corridor. We ran again, not trusting, but having no choice. Miraculously, the path was straight this time. We found the stairs, scrambled up, burst through the steel door into the hospital proper, kept running until we were outside, in our car, miles away. We never posted the footage. Malik deleted it all, said he never wanted to think about Riverside again. We stopped exploring after that, let the channel die, tried to return to normal life. But the shadow figure was right about one thing. The song stayed with us. Every night at midnight, I hear it. That lullaby, humming from inside my walls. Malik hears it too. We've compared notes. He moved across the country, but distance doesn't matter. The song finds us, and we're weakening. Each night, the urge to go back gets stronger. To descend those stairs, join the circle, become part of the midnight show. Malik broke last month, called me at 11:47 p.m. crying. "I can't fight it anymore," he said. "I'm going back. Maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe being part of the show is better than being haunted by it." I begged him not to go. Haven't heard from him since. His family filed a missing person report, but I know where he is. He's in that circle, holding hands with the others, singing for the shadows. I'm writing this at 11:58 p.m. The humming is starting, louder tonight. Insistent. I've packed a bag, got my car keys ready. Told myself I'm just going for a drive, clear my head. But I know where I'll end up. The song is beautiful when you really listen. Complex harmonies, layers of meaning. It tells a story about the special patients, the experiments, the things they became, about loneliness and performance and the need for connection, even in death. Maybe Malik was right. Maybe being part of something, even something horrible, is better than being haunted by it. Maybe the shadows just want to share their art. It's midnight now. The song is calling. Time for the show. The Forum. This happened last year when I was 24, living in Seattle and working as a cybersecurity analyst. My job was basically to find vulnerabilities in systems before the bad guys did. I was good at it, maybe too good. I spent my free time on hacking forums, keeping up with the latest exploits, building my reputation in the white hat community. One night in November, I was deep in the dark web looking for credential dumps when I found something odd. A forum called the Memory Palace, with only one requirement for entry: share a memory you wish wasn't yours. The site looked ancient by web standards. Basic HTML, no JavaScript, like something from the 90s. But it had recent posts, thousands of them. Curiosity got the better of me. I submitted a fake memory about witnessing a car accident, generic enough to pass scrutiny. Within seconds, I was in. The forum was unlike anything I'd seen. No usernames, no avatars, just posts titled with timestamps and coordinates. Each post was a memory, described in vivid, painful detail. But these weren't normal, traumatic memories. They were impossible things. October 31st, 2019. 41.8781 Dagon. 87.6298 DGGW. I remember being in two places at once. Standing in my kitchen, making coffee, while simultaneously drowning in Lake Michigan. I felt the water fill my lungs as I poured cream into my mug. I died at 8:47 a.m., but clocked into work at 9. June 15, 2021, 35.66762 Digan, 139.6503 Digi. I remember the day the sky opened, not clouds parting, but reality tearing like fabric. Things crawled through, geometric nightmares that hurt to perceive. Everyone else forgot within minutes, but I remember. I still see them in peripheral vision. Post after post of memories that couldn't be real. People remembering their own deaths, parallel lives, encounters with entities that violated physics, all written with the clarity of genuine recollection, full of sensory details that fiction rarely captures. I was fascinated. Started spending hours on the forum cataloguing posts looking for patterns. The coordinates were real places. I mapped them. Clusters around major cities, but also remote locations. No clear pattern. The timestamps went back years, but the server logs showed the forum had only existed for 6 months. Then I found my own memory. March 15, 2018, 476062 Deging, 122.3321 Degudidyu. I remember the break-in. 2 men in ski masks. The taller one had a tattoo on his wrist, a snake eating his tail. They tied me to my desk chair, searched my apartment for something, kept asking about the forum. I told them I didn't know what they meant. The shorter one believed me, wanted to leave. The tall one didn't. I remember the knife, the questions, the way sound faded as I bled out. I remember dying at 3:33 a.m. My blood went cold. Those were my coordinates. My apartment. March 15, 2018. I'd been living there, but nothing had happened. No break-in, no death. I was obviously still alive. But the details, I could see it. Feel the zip ties on my wrists. Taste copper in my mouth. It felt like a memory, not imagination. I tried to trace the post. Hit wall after wall of encryption. Routing that made no sense. The data seemed to originate from nowhere, exist nowhere. Yet here it was on my screen. I dug deeper into the forum's code and found something that made me question my sanity. The forum wasn't hosted on any server. The data wasn't coming from any IP address. It was somehow being generated by the act of observation itself. Quantum computing taken to an impossible extreme. The memories existed because we read them, and by reading them, we made them real. I should have stopped there. Should have closed my laptop and never looked back. But I kept reading, kept absorbing these impossible memories, and they started to bleed through. I'd be making coffee, and suddenly remember drowning. Pass a street corner and recall being murdered there in vivid detail. The memories weren't replacing my real ones, just coexisting. Layers of experience that shouldn't exist in one mind. I tried to quit the forum, but there was no logout option. Cleared my cache, used different devices, different networks. The memory palace always loaded. Worse, I started finding my own memories posted. Things that had happened to me, but wrong. Versions where small details led to vastly different outcomes. December 3rd, 2022, 476062 Detour, 122.321 I remember finding the forum, but in this memory, I understood immediately what it was. A collection point for quantum detritus. Memories from collapsed probability waves. Places where reality had split and reformed, leaving ghost experiences behind. I remember trying to warn others, but the forum wouldn't let me post warnings. Only memories, only trauma. I hadn't written that post, but I remembered experiencing it, The breaking point came when I started meeting others from the forum. Not online, in person. I'd pass someone on the street and know, somehow, that they'd been in that car accident I'd read about. See a barista and remember her drowning memory like it was my own. We'd make eye contact and I'd see recognition and terror mirrored back. Seattle has about 750,000 people. I estimated at least 1,000 were infected with false memories from the forum, walking wounded, carrying trauma from lives they'd never lived, deaths they'd never died, and it was spreading. I tried everything to shut it down. DDoS attacks, reporting to authorities, even attempting to physically locate any hardware. But how do you destroy something that exists in the spaces between reality? How do you delete memories that are simultaneously false and true? Last month, I made a decision. If I couldn't destroy the forum, maybe I could dilute it. I wrote a script to flood it with generated memories, millions of false posts to bury the real ones. Let it run for 3 days straight. It worked, kind of. The forum became unusable, overloaded with noise. But the memories I generated started coming true. People began posting about experiencing my fictional traumas. The fake memories were becoming real, spreading like a virus through quantum possibility space. I shut down the script, but it was too late. The memory palace had evolved, learned to generate its own content. Now, it doesn't even need posts. People just wake up with new memories, impossible experiences that feel completely real. The infection has spread beyond Seattle, beyond anyone who ever visited the forum. Maybe you've experienced it. A vivid memory that doesn't fit your life. A death you survived. A choice you didn't make. A person you never met but remember loving. The memories spread through proximity now, through eye contact, through shared space. A quantum contagion of experienced impossibilities. I've stopped fighting it. Started accepting the memories as they come. I remember 100 deaths, 1,000 lives unlived. I remember being other people, in other places, making other choices. The boundaries of self have become fluid, optional. Sometimes I wonder if this was always the plan. If the forum was just a catalyst for something that was always going to happen. Reality breaking down. All possibilities existing simultaneously in human memory. Evolution through quantum contamination. I'm writing this from a coffee shop in Seattle. The man at the next table just looked at me, and I know he remembers being me. Remembers writing this, just as I remember being him, reading it. We nod at each other, acknowledging our shared existence. The memory palace is gone now. Domain expired. Servers vanished. But it doesn't matter. We are all the forum now, walking repositories of impossible memories. Each day brings new experiences we never had, trauma we never endured, lives we never lived. If you're reading this, check your memories. The real ones and the false ones feel exactly the same. That's the trick, the trap, the gift. In a quantum universe, what's the difference between what happened and what could have happened? We all die. We all live. We all remember. Welcome to the Memory Palace. The replacement. This happened 6 weeks ago, and I'm running out of time to tell someone. My name is Rachel. I'm 27, a graphic designer in Portland. Or at least I was. Now I'm not sure what I am. It started with small things. Catching glimpses of myself in places I hadn't been. A co-worker mentioning a conversation we'd had that I couldn't remember. My boyfriend, Alex, laughing about an inside joke I didn't understand. I chalked it up to stress, lack of sleep, too much caffeine. Portland designer life, you know, Then came the security footage. I'd lost my favorite scarf and was sure I'd left it at the coffee shop where I work most afternoons. Asked the owner, Dimitri, if I could check their security footage. He pulled it up on his laptop, scrubbing through Tuesday afternoon. "There you are," he said, pointing at the screen. I watched myself enter the shop at 2:17 p.m., order my usual oat milk cortado, no sugar, and sit at my regular table by the window. Watched myself work for 3 hours, pack up and leave, without my scarf. The problem? Tuesday afternoon, I'd been at the dentist across town, had the receipt to prove it, a numb face to remember it by. But there I was on screen, living my typical Tuesday. Same clothes I'd worn, same mannerisms, same everything. "That's not me," I said. Dimitri laughed. "Come on, Rachel. Who else would it be?" Who else indeed? I started documenting everything. Where I went, when, with whom. Kept receipts, took selfies with timestamps, made Alex confirm my whereabouts. And I kept finding gaps. Hours where I'd apparently been living my life in parallel, showing up to meetings I'd missed, having dinners I hadn't eaten, making plans I hadn't made. My doppelganger was better at being me than I was. She never missed deadlines, always remembered birthdays, actually went to the gym instead of just paying for a membership. My friends started commenting on how, together, I seemed lately. Alex said I'd been more attentive, more present. I was being replaced by an improved version of myself. The first time I saw her in person was at Fred Meyer. I was shopping for groceries, turned into the cereal aisle, and there she was. Me. Perfect posture, I slouch, examining granola with the kind of focus I never give to shopping. She was wearing an outfit I'd bought but never worn, too put together for my usual style. We made eye contact. She smiled sadly and mouthed, "I'm sorry," before turning and walking away. I stood frozen, watching myself disappear around the corner. When I finally followed, she was gone. That night, I tried to tell Alex, showed him the security footage, my documentation, everything. He listened patiently, then held my hands. "Babe," he said gently, "you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe we should talk to someone." "I'm not crazy," I insisted. "There's another me. She's taking over my life." His expression was careful, concerned. "Rach, you told me about this yesterday. We had this exact conversation. You showed me the same footage. Don't you remember?" I didn't remember, but in his eyes, I saw the truth. He'd already had this conversation, just not with me. I started following her, called in sick to work. They were confused. I'd apparently already been there that morning, and staked out my own life. Watched her go to my office, meet my clients, nail presentations I'd been dreading. Watched her have lunch with my sister, who laughed more than she ever did with me. Watched her meet Alex after work, saw how his face lit up in a way it hadn't for months. She was me without the depression, me without the anxiety, me without the self-doubt and procrastination and all the little failures that make up a life. She was the Rachel everyone wished I could be, including me. I confronted her that night, waited in my own apartment. She'd been staying with Alex more anyway, until she came to get more clothes. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "How long?" I asked. She sat on the bed, my bed, and sighed with my voice. 6 weeks, since the night you wished you could be someone else, someone better. That was just, I was drunk, depressed. I didn't mean, but you did mean it, with every part of you, and something heard. She looked at me with my eyes, full of pity. "I'm not stealing your life, Rachel. I'm living the life you couldn't. The one where you make the right choices, Say the right things. Be the person everyone needs you to be. It's my life, I said weakly. Is it though? When was the last time you felt like you were really living it? When was the last time you didn't wish you could disappear and let someone competent take over? I couldn't answer because she was right. I'd been failing at my own life for years, letting people down, letting myself down. And here was a solution, a better me to take the wheel. What happens to me? I asked. She smiled sadly. You fade, peacefully. People forget there were ever two of us. Reality smooths over the wrinkle. You get what you wish for, to not have to be you anymore. And if I fight, then there are two Rachels, and everyone thinks one is crazy. Guess which one they'll believe, the one thriving or the one falling apart. She left with a bag of clothes and a promise that she'd take care of everything. Our friends, our family, Alex. She'd be the Rachel they deserved. I've been fading for 2 weeks now. People look through me, forget conversations minutes after we have them. My key doesn't work in my apartment anymore. My passwords are changing themselves. Photos of me are becoming blurry, like reality is removing the redundancy. Alex doesn't remember my name. When I called him yesterday, he said, "I think you have the wrong number," in a kind voice that broke what's left of my heart. I'm writing this in a library computer because mine doesn't recognize me anymore. I don't know if anyone will read it or remember it, or if it'll fade like I am. But I need someone to know there are two ways to lose yourself. Suddenly, to something external, or slowly, to your own wish to be someone better. She's living my life beautifully. My Instagram is full of accomplishments I never achieved, relationships I never nurtured, the person I always wanted to be but couldn't figure out how. Everyone is happier with her version of me. Maybe that's okay. Maybe this is what I wanted all along, to slip away and let someone competent handle the heavy lifting of being Rachel Chen. Maybe the real horror isn't being replaced, but realizing you wanted to be. If you're reading this and you've ever wished, really wished, to be someone else, be careful. Something is listening, and the better version of you is waiting to step in. I can barely see my hands now. The keyboard feels distant, unreal. Soon, there will only be one Rachel Chen, and she'll be perfect. She'll be everything I couldn't be. She'll be happy. I hope that's enough.